Good afternoon. Welcome to Rosewood London. My name is Tessa Gorman. I am the Managing Director here, and I have the privilege of welcoming you all today for the BSME ICONS lunch. We are incredibly proud of our partnership and our friendship with BSME, which has grown and developed through the years. It leans into our literary heritage, our location, but also the importance of community and building community in the arts. So I know that you will have a fabulous afternoon. We will endeavor to keep you as cool as possible. We have been hugging and giving our chillers lots of TLC through the last couple of days. But we're thrilled to have you all here and have a wonderful afternoon. And I will hand over to Dan Green. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Dan.
Good to meet you. Right. Many thanks, Tessa, for a lovely introduction. We really, really value this partnership with the Rosewood. It's absolutely fabulous setting, I'm sure you agree. And thank you very much for your generous hosting. Thank you, everybody, as well, for making the effort to come here today on an absolutely roasting day. You braved the tremendous heat, and I hope you're enjoying the aircon. This is actually the room to be in for more reasons than one. So, welcome, Mr. Hislop, right? Editor of The Private Eye.
Yes.
For 40 years.
God.
Captain of Have I Got News For You team for 71 series. Comedian, satirist, podcast, historian, writer of plays on the A-level syllabus, I believe.
Yes, I'm very proud of that one.
The list goes on. And also amongst your many awards and accolades, you've received the BSME's Editor's Editor and the coveted Mark Boxer Award, which is, I think, the full house of BSME gongs.
Right, and cycling proficiency, I got. Really old.
It's a pleasure for me as a fellow print-only editor to meet another editor flying the flag.
Yeah, no, I'm still very, very keen on print. Which I think is why I keep getting invited to these occasions, but I'll happily bang the drum.
Excellent, good stuff. Well, today we're going to look back at 40 years. Yep. Yeah, 40 years at the helm of Private Eye. But before we step backwards in time, let's talk about the big news this week.
Yep.
It's obviously Cape Verde holding Uruguay to a 2-2 draw at the World Cup.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, shocked.
One hell of a game.
Yeah, amazing. And some perhaps less surprising news as well. I don't know if you heard about this. The resignation of the 7th Prime Minister in 10 years.
Yes, but I mean, it was, I was very, very grateful to Keir Starmer because normally Prime Ministers resign on the Tuesday after we've gone to press. So this Monday was spent in pure admiration for Keir for resigning at about 11 o'clock when we went to press at Monday at 3:30. So I was very pleased. And also, I was very pleased that he left in the style in which he'd governed, i.e. he'd told everybody on our magazine, I'm going to fight on, I'm not going to resign. And then he did a massive U-turn and disappeared. So it was very good timing for us. And that, in the end, as an editor, is the important thing.
Absolutely, yes. that press deadline. When is your press deadline, by the way?
It's about 3:30.
Okay, so you've had plenty of time to...
Yeah,
Did you have the cover in place?
No, we had a number of covers of people saying they were going to stand or not stand, and then it turned into a coronation, and we found a fabulous picture of a coronation coach, and we said, Andy Burnham comes to London. Procession with people shouting, long live the King of the North. And I was particularly, I mean, I had this joke up my sleeve, but it was the nation sheds a Keir. See
very
what I did
good,
there?
Very good.
Which, again, some people, even in our office, were saying it was quite moving. And I fired them.
So did you anticipate that resignation at all? I mean, because he had been saying he was going to stay, he was going to fight. Yeah. I think things were, changing or looking up a little bit, immigration numbers had fallen, that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, most prime ministers we've had recently, if they were at their desk, and it said, immigration numbers have fallen, even the small boats numbers have fallen, growth isn't looking as bad as it was, inflation has fallen, they'd be laughing. They'd be boasting about that. He had to include it in a goodbye speech. It is a very, very strange thing that's happened. And for us, I thought, okay, the Tories are obsessed by stabbing each other in the back and having someone new every year. Labour won't do this, but they immediately did it.
Yeah.
Proving that they're fit for government. It was a really odd week.
It was,
Print journalism has difficulty keeping up with the cycle, but then so does everything else. Eventually, unless you're the BBC and you say, well, watch this space, wait and see, and offer no opinion at all, it's quite difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you would have worked up how many covers before you arrived at this one?
Well, the process of doing the cover is a group of people get together in the office and they all come up with ideas, and then we put mine on the cover. Which is, it's a sort of democratic editorial style.
I mean, that's the editor's
I've developed
right,
over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you rate the prospects for our new king, our new leader?
Yeah.
I mean, I suspect that Brits don't really think much of a coronation. It seems to chafe a little bit.
No, we ran a spoof piece inside, which was a Daily Mail editorial calling for Burnham to resign, even though he wasn't Prime Minister yet. I don't think he's got much time. Usually as Prime Minister, you get a honeymoon period where you can raise tax or annoy the members of your party. By the time he gets in September, I think the honeymoon will have gone. So I think he's going to be the same person again with the same problems. But, I may be wrong. I'm known for my optimism. So I have a feeling we're going to be covering the same story. I don't think for a while there's going to be anything particularly different. But, I'm often wrong.
Well,
as lawyers will tell you.
Well, maybe more on that later. Talking about changes of leader,
yes,
I'd like to take you back now to the very start of your editing career.
Right.
I think you became editor at 26.
I did.
Very precocious age to take the helm of a national magazine.
I think that now. At the time, I thought, for God's sake, I'm 26. When am I going to get this job?
And roughly how long had you been working at Private Eye at that time?
I'd been there a couple of years, and then my predecessor, who you gave various awards as well, he decided that he'd just had enough. He'd had enough of the libel actions, he'd just had enough, period. And he instituted a full recruiting process, i.e. he asked me into the office and said, would you like to be editor? And didn't consult anyone.
A coronation.
It was a coronation, but he didn't ask the managing director or any of the staff or anyone at all, which was very much Richard's style. And I was 26, and there were a number of middle-aged journalists who were very, very unhappy about this ridiculous boy being given a job. And Private Eye in those days was owned by Peter Cook, the comedian, who owned the shares. And they decided they would take Peter out to lunch and get him to change his mind. It was very stupid, because taking Peter Cook out to lunch never involved any food. And they had an absolutely fabulous lunch where Peter drank happily and copiously. And he appeared in the office, and he couldn't quite remember what was happening. And he said to me, welcome aboard. So the coup failed. And then I was very generous and sacked all the people who'd been involved. But, I was young.
That's interesting, because you anticipated my next question beautifully.
Yes.
Because I think a new editor often likes to shake things up.
Yes.
And put their own stamp on the magazine. And you clearly
well, there was,
did that.
I mean, Private Eye in those days, there was, the focus had moved onto, there was a gossip column run by a man called Nigel Dempster and Mackay, and I felt it had lost the initial thrust, which was be funny, be satirical, and run solid journalistic pieces. And the first thing I did is I hired Paul Foote, who was one of the early journalists there and the most brilliant journalist ever. He wasn't a youngster. He was the same age as, he was a friend of the man I'd replaced, but he was working for the Mirror, and I thought, I have got to have you. Then I hired Francis Wheen, an utterly brilliant journalist who'd made his name on The Independent, and I started building a team of people who I thought could make the journalism work. And then on the joke side, I looked round, pretty comprehensively and chose Nick Newman, who I was at school with, a brilliant cartoonist who's now on the Sunday Times, and I started working with Nick, who'd been drawing a bit for the paper, and Catherine Lamb, the cartoonist, who's worked for a college newspaper, who I knew from there, and tried to build up my team. And over 40 years, there's been a huge sort of addition of people, but on the whole, people don't leave the Eye now. They die.
They get wheeled out.
Or they retire reluctantly.
Wow.
But on the whole, you were talking earlier about the difficulty of replacing from the bottom when people don't want to leave. But I find what we've ended up doing is just expanding, which is totally counterintuitive and not the narrative that everyone wants to hear.
Well, that's one of the sort of marks of private eye, right? As print has been falling down and circulation has been dipping, you've kind of been growing, or at least keeping things sort of stable, which is
we're selling 220,000 now, on a good week, 230,000, which is what we were selling 20 years ago and more than we were selling in 2001, where we were selling about 170. So I do keep fairly close eye on these figures. So my optimism about print, as opposed to everything else in life, has always been rewarded by saying, if you make it better, if you make it bigger, it will come.
Yeah.
I mean, during COVID, I thought it was so miserable, everything, that I put on 2 whole pages of cartoons, just cartoons, on the grounds that whatever else we were doing, we should cheer people up. And the first thing people said to me is, A, we like it, but where are the young cartoonists? And I said, they'll turn up if you offer them money.
There's space for them.
And space. And I did this. Occasionally I would ring someone up and say, I really like your stuff online. I've got this brilliant idea. I give you money and you give me the cartoon. And they say, I don't understand how that works.
How does that work?
And then I explain it, that you give it to us and you don't give it to anyone else, you don't put it up there. And we have an extraordinary range of young cartoonists now. I mean, they can draw, they're funny, and they cover their own world.
Fantastic.
And so I don't ever think any of these things are particularly well thought out, but I just get the idea that if you believe that people will want to see this stuff, well-drawn, beautiful artwork, clever people being funny, they'll do it.
Yeah.
And the same is essentially true of journalism, which, someone very nice asking, do you have younger journalists? And the answer is yes. I mean, the trouble is how to accommodate them. It's not that they're not there or they're not any good. It's what you get them to do.
Indeed. But I don't think it was all plain sailing at the start.
It was. You want to go back, don't you?
I do want to go back. We've shot forward too far.
Yeah.
I believe that having promised to reduce the Eye's libel bills,
Yes.
you had a bit of a rocky start.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Being quite young, I made a number of very pompous speeches saying, I can't believe that the libel bills of the previous editorship, and really, I will get this down sensibly, which I didn't at all. I lost an absolute stack of libel actions and shed loads of money. I nearly bankrupt the magazine on one day with a libel award against me of £600,000. That was before costs. So,
Gosh.
And £600,000 from a jury, you'd think, I wonder who he was taking on, someone very popular, you know, a big celebrity. No, it was the wife of a serial killer, Mrs. Sonia Sutcliffe, and such was my brilliance, I couldn't even win against her.
But you came back from that, I'm proud to say, pleased to say.
Yeah, well, I left court that day thinking, we're trading insolvently, which we were. And there was a bank of journalists there outside the High Court. And they said, give us a quote. And I said, well, if that's justice, and I couldn't think of anything else. So I said, I'm a banana, which will probably end up on my tombstone. And this became one of my great quotes, which it means nothing. And I then started a campaign, which was called the Banana Balls campaign, basically to say, if you lose a leg or an eye, you get 20,000 compensation. If you go to court for libel, you can get an unlimited amount of money. And I did think these were not fair comparisons. And partly as a result of that campaign, juries were no longer allowed just to come up with a figure. The judge was not allowed to say, you know, give them whatever you like. And he had to direct. And then the Guardian won of course they won, the Guardian, 2 libel actions. And the law changed fairly significantly. But, I mean, yes, I probably fought about 40 cases then, and I had a pretty good strike rate. I won 1.
I believe you are the most actioned, or the person who's had the most libel actions.
I
against
was
them
in the Guinness Book of Records,
yeah.
But I've lost that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, the change in the libel laws meant, I mean, there are many fewer libel actions nowadays, and I think they've replaced that category with man who eats most spaghetti. So that one's gone. So no, I don't have that anymore.
Excellent. Well, to go on to the magazine and your editing style and your
Yes.
process of that, I think it's fair to say that Private Eye is quite a unique magazine in the sort of UK media landscape. I mean, if you come across it for the first time, there's no bylines on the stories.
No.
A fair number of pieces are signed off with cryptic-sounding monikers like Old Sparky,
Yes.
Hedgehog,
Yep.
Lady Liberty. Who are these people? And the headlines are also quite cryptic. I feel like, you know, in your last issue you had artificial sweetener and that old chestnut. You kind of have to read to the end of the piece to understand what they're about. So,
well, reading to the end of the piece is something I'm quite keen on.
but I don't think this is how, you know, they teach journalism in most sort of schools these days.
No, but I mean, again, I do think that magazines in particular are clubs. If you do it right, your magazine is a club, and Private Eye is fairly heavily modelled on the Beano, which is a children's comic with a probably slightly average age, slightly older than ours. But what you get is, if you follow it, if you stick with us, you get these jokes, you enjoy these jokes, you work out. I'm not going to read Old Sparky because he's writing about the energy supply. It doesn't matter. Other people will be wanting to read that bit. You know what I mean? You don't have to read Pilotti, who's writing about architecture and old buildings. If that doesn't interest you, there's something else on another page. The idea is to offer a great spread of material. There are no bylines for 2 reasons. One is it's still much, much easier with libel. So the editor takes all the blame, which is fine, because it's usually my fault. And the second reason is that people in other industries, and there's lots of people here who do specific trade and industry mags, can write about their own industry without being fired from their own papers or from their own industries. So we have, you know, a medical column written by someone, you know, who used to be a doctor, and when he writes about Lucy Letby, he worked in a neonatal unit, so you know that he has done this once before. Often, the contributors can't resist the desire to tell everyone it's them. So I'll have spent 10 years saying, no, I can't possibly tell you who writes that column. And they said, oh, he was at dinner saying it's me. So that tends to blow people's anonymity. But on the whole, that's very, very useful for us, because it just keeps it, you can recognize the style, you know the expertise, but they don't have to answer for it inside their own worlds.
So that's where the stories come from.
It is.
It is, and well, I guess it's time we talked about these legendary private eye lunches.
Yes.
Tell us more about these.
Well, we have a lunch once a fortnight in which I and various other journalists who work for the Eye invite anyone who they think will be good company or will be a good source or will generate goodwill or ill will. And they work as a way of getting briefed apart from anything else. I mean, it's fantastically useful to find out what other journalists, other hacks, other people are thinking. We have MPs come along. We have sort of the odd member of the House of Lords. We have the odd distinguished guests from various spheres. Well, they're not very distinguished, but they come. So you get a mix. And there is quite a lot of drink, and they do go on a bit.
So do people arrive ready to gossip? Do they arrive like ready to unburden themselves? Or
No, they arrive feeling a bit
about...
suspicious, thinking, I bet Hislop's a shit. And then I'm charming. And then they think, no, this is the sort of club I'd like to belong to. And then they help. And, you know, sometimes I feel, oh, the edge is going off these lunches. Are they as good as they were? But middle of last year, we were rung up by the restaurant saying, 2 of your guests have been discovered in the toilet together. Could you say that we don't really approve of this and we'd like them to leave? So that was part of my editorial job. I said to them, can you find a room somewhere else?
So yeah, they have a legendary mythical status.
Yeah, but and real. So yeah, no, they are incredibly useful. And occasionally they descend into shouting matches. I remember a lunch where Christopher Hitchens and Paul Foote stood up shouting at each other in the middle of the Iraq War about where the weapons of mass destruction would be found. And Christopher Hitchens, who was incredibly eloquent, shouted, you mark my words, they'll be hidden underneath the presidential palace. And I think a few months later, Paul wrote him a note saying, no, they won't. Anyway, so it's very high level and intellectual as well as, as everything else.
Humour is a massive part of the mix, obviously,
Yeah.
and I've read, it says here that you're a huge fan of Swift, and I found that very interesting because my 8-year-old daughter is also a massive Swiftie.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always been a Swiftie. I know all his albums.
Wild guess, that's the 17th century satirist. Right?
Well, I like Andy Burnham. I read English at university. I think it's one of the many things we have in common. I'm from the north, love football. No, none of that's true. But I read English, and it was a fantastic opportunity for me. I just read everybody who's ever been funny in English and got paid for it. I'm very old. This was the days when you were paid to go to university rather than had to take out a loan for life and then pay 6% forever. You can see there's a fairly grumpy parent here. So I got the chance to read everybody who I'd ever thought was any good. And English satire is an unbelievably rich 300-year-old tradition. And time after time, I just find we are doing the same jokes again. Literally, in this issue, there's a joke about Prince Andrew, and there's a picture of him, and there was a story about a royal prince being arrested. So we put royal prince arrested, picture of Prince Andrew, and then he goes, phew, it was a Norwegian. We thought, that's quite funny. There's a drawing by James Gilray, 300 years ago. Someone comes into the king, King George III, 250 years ago, and says, the king's been shot. And the king is sitting there saying, phew, it was a Swedish one. Same gag, I've just used it again. And I love the tradition of working in it, of feeling we've been doing this for a long time. Yeah. It's a verbal tradition, it's a print tradition, it's pamphlets, it's magazines, it's a world which I love and I recognise, and which is still very accessible.
And it's very close to the bone as well. I think Swift said his aim was not to divert the world, but to vex it.
Yes, and he wrote Gulliver's Travels. Yeah. And he'd have been so cross that it's remembered as a children's book. I mean, it's pretty adult. I mean, when Gulliver, who's travelling around, and he's this big, and he goes to Lilliput, and people are this big, he becomes a friend of the king's by putting out a fire in the palace. And in the children's books, it's rather brushed over how he puts out the fire. He just pisses all over the capital city in a huge tidal wave. And there's a lot of that, in it, which I like very much.
So, but you seem to also have like a sense of outrage against things, against unfairness, pretense, pomposity, corruption. You know, what really gets your goat, Ian?
I don't know, I just sort of lose it sometimes. I mean, I remember I went on Peston about a year ago. There was the chairman of the Tory party was talking about the post office salesman, and he was just talking bollocks. And I'd said to Peston that I would behave, and I would sort of wait and listen to what he said, and I just started shouting at him. And he said, will you let me finish? And I said, no, I'm going to carry on talking until the credits. You see, anyone can do it. I'm going to carry on talking. You can't say anything at all. You can't say a word, can you, Mr. Berry? No, you can't. You can't say anything. And then the credits rolled, which was incredibly childish.
Very, very funny.
But I just thought, you know, he'd come on. I'd said, I think Fujitsu, who are the tech company who should pay up, I said, they should pay £1 million a head, and they wouldn't even notice it on this year's profits. They just wouldn't. And he said, well, we're looking at figures of, that sort of magnitude. I thought, no, you're not. You hadn't given it any thought. So I do get cross. Yeah. And often not to my own credit, really. But
well, you can be fantastically rude on Have I Got News For You? I think the recent one with Michael Gove, I was cheering you on and then also kind of like wincing. But, why do these people come on?
I don't know, but I'm really grateful.
Do they think they're going to get the better of you? Do they think, or is like being beasted part of their redemption cycle? I mean, like what?
Yes, it could be a sort of masochism. I think Michael Gove thought, I'm now a journalist. He's running a magazine. He's a magazine editor. All that stuff's in the past. It's been forgotten and forgiven. And I don't think it has. And, I mean, particularly COVID, which, again, was just a period of enormous irritation. There's almost no one I know who didn't have some experience. I mean, I had it of not being able to visit a person in a care home who then died, and that we couldn't go to the funeral. And nearly everyone has that. Mm-hmm. And the idea that Boris was pissed and dancing about to ABBA or... and ignoring the rules, it's too irritating. And Gove actually has apologised for Partygate. But Baroness Moan's still in the House of Lords. No one's been prosecuted over that PPE channel. All of that is still a real and live story. And it is that feeling of, oh, well, it was all a long time ago. It wasn't, actually. No, it wasn't. And no one cares anymore. And I think one of the things, because I've been there for 40 years, one of the things Private Eye can do, and most magazines can do, is just repeat. And people say, why do you go on about that story? And you think, because we can. We can come back to it next week, and we can do it the week after, and you'll really hate it. And some of the readers will say, oh, this is boring. And you say, no, but we're going to do it again now. Yes. And eventually, it will turn up. There was a story in Slicker from, it was 15 years ago about Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein. You can keep on saying it, and eventually it will turn up.
Comes through. Yeah, I mean, editors are notorious for getting bored and stories actually long before readers do, potentially. How do you resist that instinct and just, stick with the story, repeating yourself over years like you did with the, I remember you said this when you did the BSME post office scandal event, that, that was one of the benefits of a specialist publication.
Yes, you can do it, and we do wrap it up so that there's always something else as well as that. I mean, I had some very earnest American postgraduate saying, what is Private Eye's mission statement? And I said, well, it's from an English philosopher called Mary Poppins, and it's a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, and that's very much what we believe. But it is sort of true. You will get something else, but you may well get a repeat of the post office story. And I think I've probably said this before, but some of the campaigners and some of the sources on these stories are so brilliant. And Alan Bates is just an incredibly funny bloke. I mean, as well as being stubborn and committed and indomitable, I mean, he's just genuinely funny. And he did ring me, and he said, I'd like to complain about the last issue of Private Eye. And I thought, oh, God, what have we done? And he said, there's one page that does not mention the post office. And I thought, I mean, you are brilliant. And he knew that it gets boring, or it can be seen to get boring. But, the repetition and, Computer Weekly were the first. We came in after them. It is acting as a megaphone, really, for the campaigners and for essentially the early journalists who find it, and you can amplify it.
Fantastic. Well, I've got so many more questions. I could keep on going on and on and on. I think it's probably polite to bring people in.
I'm sorry.
I do want to ask one question before we throw to the people in the room here. I just think behooves me to ask. So a lot of editors, I think, might move on after, 8 or so years. You come in, you freshen the title up, you make it your own, period of stability, and then you kind of find that you're actually just repeating the same things, and you need a fresh challenge, or the powers that be want somebody fresher to come along. So I'm wondering, have you got a plan or date in mind to hand over to a new editor?
Fairly simple answer, no.
Right, I'm on that. Good. I'm glad to hear it. What keeps you going?
Well, when I took over again, I made a number of speeches saying, I think it's probably important for me to do this job for a number of years, maybe 3, 5 years, and then very much move on. And 40 years later, I look back and I thought, who were you? There isn't a better job. It's incredibly good fun. And it changes a lot. I mean, over 40 years, the mag itself, the trick, I think, with magazines is to make them look the same so people think it's the same, but they're getting something else inside it. So there's a huge number of new columns, there's a lot of different voices, writers, people, but the ethos and the feel of the magazine should remain the same. The other thing is I haven't been offered any other jobs, which is always a good sign. So, no, I'm not intending to go anywhere. But, there's lots of lean and hungry young people in the office. So, you never know.
And, what tips can you give a room full of editors who sometimes, it feels like we're all suffering death by 1,000 cuts? And how do you stay optimistic?
I don't want to sound smug because I don't have a lot of the same pressures that you lot do. I have, when you say the powers that be, the Eye is now, after 40 years, it's now run by a not-for-profit trust. It is not owned by a company. We don't have shareholders anymore. We used to, but again, they decided, one of them, Peter Cook's widow, who's sadly no longer with us, she said she was going to sell her share to Mohammed Fayed. And the Observer asked me how I felt, and I said, fine, I'll burn down the building. Which again is, I think, discouraged her as a shareholder to have any further input. So no, I mean, my advice is just, every time I make a decision which I think is too bold, it seems to be the right one. I think timidity is the thing that kills you.
Yeah.
And that's believing that no one will want this, there aren't any young people who read, there aren't any young people who write. Even the old people are bored and they're listening to podcasts. You know, I don't think any of that is necessarily true.
Yeah,
and I go on believing that.
I can attest to that.
I'll tell you the most exciting thing in our industry. I read a piece saying, people now, there's such a choice of podcasts that you can now get a transcript of your podcast. And I'm thinking, that's called a piece. It's journalism. We're back.
It's come full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the BSME is running, for the first time this year, the Young Writers' Prize with Caitlin Moran, and we've had so many entries, and we're currently judging them, and yeah, it's really heartening. The writing is incredible. The topics are new and fresh and different.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a lot of encouragement to be had, and you know, people are interested, even young people.
Well, we run
and
these
writing.
Paul Foot Awards once a year, which is for campaigning or investigative journalism. You know, the entries are extraordinary. This year we had to invent some category of young journalists because there were so many of them to actually fit on the list. And it's regional and it's varied and the platforms change. But the basic stories are still really good.
Yeah. Excellent. That's a good spot to sort of stop and throw this to the room before time runs away with me completely. There's so much we haven't touched on, but I think we'll have some really incisive questions from our guests gathered. I think probably hands up is the best way to do it, and I'll just point at people. We have a roving mic. I think what would be really great would be if you could say your name and your publication.
Hello, I'm Lisa Sinclair. I'm the director of magazines at Bauer. And I would like to know, which scoop are you most proud of?
Do you know, I think it is the post office, just because it was so long and it seemed so unlikely. I mean, I was asked the scoop that no one seems at all interested in is the stuff we're running about Teesside, which I still think is a brilliant story, but literally no one cares. So it's twice in this issue. I'm not going to be defeated. Eventually someone will care.
Keep repeating that.
Yeah, it'll be in there forever. So that, yeah, I mean, a lot of the early PFI stuff, Phil Hammond, who is MD, he writes the medical stuff, but he's had a brilliant run over the years. He was particularly good in COVID. A lot of people just bought the magazine, as far as I can see, to read what Phil had to say, which, again, I never told him because he'll want money. But, no, I mean, there are the IT stuff, I was very early stuff. The outsourcing stuff, I was very proud of. A lot of the miscarriages, most of the stuff Paul wrote in the early days. I mean, there is a lot of stuff there. Over 40 years, yeah, I know the odds are you should get something right. But I think we've done okay.
Excellent. Could you have the mic here, please?
Thank you. It's Murdo Morrison. I'm from Flight Global. Looking back over these 40 years, is there a cover or a story or a joke that you now regret running on matters of taste rather than for legal reasons? I
don't regret most of the legal ones. Again, the Diana cover, which is the most complained cover about ever, I think it was just after her death, and we ran a piece of people outside Buckingham Palace saying, you know, the papers are appalling, and someone saying, yeah, I couldn't get hold of one, which was sort of an attack on the general public, which doesn't go down very well on the whole, but I still think it was right. The one that was drawn, Boris Johnson's legacy, which we had a huge overflowing toilet, which, again, a lot of newsagents just didn't sell it. And a lot of our readers were very, very cross. The cover at the start of the Gaza War, which got us into a vast amount of trouble, which I think at the time was considered very offensive, and now is just a statement of fact. So I don't regret those ones. The ones I think I meant to, I don't, if I'm honest. I do hate getting things wrong, because I think if people don't believe the stories you run, then you've lost it. And it's not making mistakes, it's just if there's a feeling that you'll run any old rubbish. And particularly now, because when we started, a lot of it was about breaking stories. Now it's about explaining why stories aren't true. There is so much false information out there that print still has a sort of authority, and established titles still have a vague legitimacy that you can say, no, this really didn't happen. You know, this is only in your bedroom when you're reading stuff from people who you shouldn't be reading. And so we spend a lot of time now dismembering stories rather than breaking them. But I think that's fine.
And on the covers,
Yeah.
what sells?
What sells?
Yeah, is it the people? Is it the joke? What, do you know when you get a cover you're like, that's going to be great?
No. It's very difficult to tell what will absolutely work. I think the best-selling cover, we just ran a straightforward apology to Trump on behalf of mostly American newspapers, saying, you know, up to this point we'd thought you were a pathetic orange man baby, but now that you've come after us and started buying us up, we realise you're a genius, and we've never believed so much in Trumpism. And I thought it was perhaps a bit earnest, the statement of fact, but that was a huge seller. And that was just literally typeface.
Trump sells.
Yeah. And then it is very difficult to know. I mean, the bestseller recently was Peter Mandelson in his underpants, which again is, we were advised, Peter Mandelson in his underpants is not going to sell any copies on the newsstand. And we had a picture of Peter, and then the bubble said, I've let my party down, I've let myself down, I've let my trousers down.
Amazing.
Which did make me laugh a great deal. And that was a huge seller. So, I mean, a lot of the time I just don't know.
Okay, next question. We've got one next door, and then we'll come over here.
Thank you. My name's Guy Woodward. I used to edit Decanter magazine. In fact, I used to chair the BSME a long time ago. I get the impression, Ian, you're not a huge fan or user of social media. I might be wrong, but if you were a 26-year-old editor starting out today, do you think you would be, and how would you use it?
I think I'd have to be, but I think I've been fortunate in basically not doing it. I mean, obviously there are young people and middle-aged people and all sorts of people in my office who are very good on this stuff and are good at analysing it. And we have, I mean, this is the way things change, you know. 3-4 years ago, we didn't have a column. Now we have 2 columns every time about AI and social media. Usually about the large social media platforms pretending that they can't do anything about their content. until it, A, threatens their resources for 5 seconds, or their advertisers, or their management. And then they find, my goodness, this algorithm's easy to tweak after all. So we spend a lot of time doing that. I mean, I think there will be a generation of young people who are quite cross about it now. And I hope they will write about it rudely. I'm amazed that essentially, a handful of extraordinarily odd men, and they are all men, have managed over, my last 40 years, dictate how the world lives and thinks and feels almost entirely to the detriment of everybody. And I do believe that. I mean, I think it's absolutely bizarre how we've let that happen. And there's no regulation, and it's been to the detriment of all of us in journalism. The idea that people, listening to people who should know better saying, I read this brilliant story online. Oh yeah, where's it from? I'm not sure.
Not sure.
Do you think you might want to check it? See who's written it just beforehand? Because, it might help. I mean, they're getting better at schools, but I believe there should be, compulsory social media class once a week about deconstructing information you get online. I mean, during COVID, there was the world's most popular viral ad, 15 people in white coats telling you that COVID didn't exist. People all over the world saying, look, he's a doctor, he's from Massachusetts, he's from Croatia, this is unbelievable. These are, someone eventually bothered. They'd all been struck off, all of them. For very obvious reasons, due to being lunatic and mad. So I just feel, I know it has to be taken on. I know a younger generation have certainly got to use it. But I'm more interested in criticising it, really.
So, no AI to write your columns for a while, yeah?
No, there's no AI at all. I mean, the last time, we do this in the office. We looked up AI about private eye on the Google thing, and it said we're owned by Lord Rothermere. And I thought, bloody hell, no one's told me. I'd start adjusting the copy rapidly. Non-doms, yes.
Excellent. Let's take another question here.
As we look at this smouldering husk of one Michael Gove down the road after that interaction with you, the striking thing about that exchange, you've got this knack of getting to the nub of what we're all thinking, and you carried the UK with you, let's face it, over that. Has the poacher ever thought about becoming gamekeeper? And assuming your answer is no, what do we do about the political class, and what can, for example, the media do to raise quality and standards in this world? Sorry, I should say, Andy Pike, I have a consultancy now, but I used to work in government until relatively recently, including number 10 in communications.
Well, A, thank you for that. B, I do what my children have often described as a career of stating the obvious, which is sort of what children are for. But largely, I think that's what I tend to do on those exchanges. I mean, it doesn't strike me as very magical, just to say what most people seem to believe to be true and the facts indicate. But we have got into and it's about halfway through, I think, my last 40 years. I mean, people have always told lies in politics and always spun things, but it's got to a point where that's a default position. So nowadays, people just get very, very cross when the question is not answered. Why are you doing this? Is it because of what is pretty obviously true? If you said, yes, we are doing that, it diffuses it. I mean, it is really interesting that Farage, he's in real trouble for the first time because he won't answer the question, why did you accept 5 million quid? He's given a number of different answers, but the interesting thing is how tetchy he is. And I love the word tetchy because it does describe politicians as saying, with men he goes, oh right, yeah, that's important, is it? And with women he goes, thanks love, yes. But it's the same emotion. He's absolutely furious. I mean, we had again, and what can you do is you just keep at it. With Farage, one of our journalists asked him saying, I gather you have a private company that money is paid into. And he said, yeah, companies, they employ people for the economy. Do you understand that? And then we looked up the company. You know how many people it employs? One. Mr. N. Farage. It's just this level of nonsense. And you do want people to say, and I think is one of Starmer's real problems, is just say, have we got no money at all? Is the answer yes? Yes. Then there are two ways, aren't there? We can either borrow some more, or you can cut some things and tax some things, and you want the answer to be yes. Because obviously we can't borrow anymore because no one will lend us any. They're not fools. So, do you know what I mean? It's just that level of it's not saying, oh, God, isn't everything incredibly simple, but it's just not answering. And I do think that's what journalism is basically about. It's just asking the questions again. Why can't we do this? If there's a reason, fine. If there isn't, why not?
Okay, I think we've got time for 2 more questions. We'll go here and then here. I think that would probably cover it off. Is that okay? 2 more questions?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Dan. Just very quick, Tom Pattinson, Positive News over here. Just very quickly, just following up on that point, really. How much of the media, though, are to blame for this constant sort of revolving door of prime ministers? Because we've all been in these press conferences with government officials where they come to the question point and every single journalist just says the same thing. When are you going to resign? When are you going to resign?
Yeah.
Even on Radio 4 in the mornings, a minister comes on with a policy, but the question is still, but do you think he should resign because of that? And there is no interrogation of the policies, really. It's just the politics. And I'm interested to hear what you think about the responsibility of the media today.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think everybody has got involved in the psychodrama that Labour said we're not going to do that anymore. We've had all these Tories going out. And a very good analyst said the political class, and that includes political journalists, are only now interested in campaigning. They're not interested in governing, the boring bit. And the vast majority of private eye is made up of the boring bits. There's a page about local councils, there's a page about utilities, there's a lot about energy, there's stuff about the NHS. These are the things that, in the end, matter to most people. And I think we have collectively, and I'm not entirely innocent of this myself, got into who's up, who's down, who's next, and again, there are some people who say this is accelerated by social media because the algorithm wants the next thing. What else is going to happen next? It's partly a human response. I'm bored with that. I want that. But I do think collectively we've got to think what would be useful next, and endless substitution of different personalities on top of the same problem isn't necessarily hopeful. But I think that is true.
Excellent. So, last question to end the session today.
Hi, my name's Emily.
That's a very gloomy end.
Yeah, this might not be less gloomy, sorry. I'm Emily Hilton. I'm a freelance writer. You hinted at it earlier. We are living through a particular, I think, global crisis in terms of the decline of liberal democracy, the rise of far-right politics. Here in the UK, we've seen these very nefarious forces, I think, dividing our communities, dividing our society. And I'm just curious if you feel like the role of satire and the role of journalism to be able to hold power to account has changed maybe since you started, given this sort of rapid decline of many of the institutions that we thought would protect us are actually coming into a lot of question right now.
Yes, I still do think that is the point. Two things in your answer. I was just reading one of the great early satirists was called, in Britain, was Daniel Defoe, who's a journalist. And he said, the end of satire is reform. And I thought, oh, God, no. But I think what he meant was actual reform. And that's very much the sort of British tradition that I think the I stands in and journalist stands in, is you want things to get better. People say, you know, why haven't you brought the government down? Well, you know, that's sort of for the public to do during the Miami. It's sort of, I do believe that that is the reform. And so, yes, I still think it's worth it. You know, people say to me, you've been there 40 years, you've achieved nothing. Things are worse than ever. And I go, yeah, but it had been much worse. And the other is, the thing I always say is just, the good thing about having been doing anything a long time or having a longer view is it makes you more optimistic. And my mother-in-law, who was a rather wonderful woman, she said to me, it was at the end of last year, and just before she died, she said, Ian, I've never been so worried about the political situation internationally as I am now. And I said, Mary, you were a teenager in 1939. And she said, oh yes, so I was. The longer view.
Brilliant. That is a positive note to end on. A note of optimism there. There's still hope. There's still a point. Keeping it on. We can still make things better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for coming, sharing your insights, sharing your time. You've been a brilliant sport. Everybody, if we could please show our appreciation for this icon of magazine editing. And now to lunch.